Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Tradition, we go around, say our names. Feel free to use your first, last, both, or another name of your choice. My name is Bob Blair.
Arthur Payne. Bob Sinha.
Sujay.
Baruch. Dean.
Marvin.
Joe.
William Alton.
Paul.
Peter Kumar.
Clint.
Peter.
Jen Stewart.
Paul.
Ray Dyer. Dave.
Alan. Steve Carson.
Mark.
Howard Decourt.
Larry Choi.
I'm Carl Wolf.
Carl Lasagna.
John.
Jack.
Is there anybody here for the first time or returning after an extended period?
Larry.
Larry, in fact, Larry Barnett is our speaker today. He's been a member of the Sonoma City Council for the past 12 years and a former mayor of Sonoma. His exposure to Buddhism began in 1974 with his attendance at Fort Mason of the Black Hat ceremony of the 16th Karmapa. And he has forgiven me from attempting to pronounce many of the other names in lineage. His topic today is politics as a spiritual practice. We've got one hell of a nirvana. Indeed. Larry?
Thank you. Let me start by saying that I appreciate the invitation to come from my friend Jim Stewart. Jim and I have known each other since we were in high school. And I must tell you that the 17-year-old Jim Stewart was as radiant, luminous, open-hearted as you could imagine, and so we made him our class president.
Now we want the real juice.
You'll have to get that from Jim. I thought I'd tell some stories today, read you a few poems that might prompt some conversation about politics as a spiritual practice. It certainly isn't why I got into politics, but I can say quite certainly that politics reinvigorated and has provided an incredible wealth of material for my spiritual practice. Being in an elected position is really no different than anything else in life. It's just more intense. And everything about the experience of essentially being public is magnified. So all the reactions that one has to what happens are magnified. All the reactions of the community to what you do are magnified. Everything is magnified. So even one's sitting practice gets magnified. And really being in a political office is not too unlike walking out of your house naked every day and watching everybody dress you up the way they think you ought to look. There is an enormous amount of projection that takes place, and before too long you discover that whatever you thought you were in a role, that the role really doesn't belong to you, that the role belongs to the community. And from the standpoint of ego, from the standpoint of a sense of self, all of that changes quite radically as you begin to absorb and work with the energy in a community. Now, Sonoma is a small town. There's only 10,000 people in the town itself. The valley around it is another 30,000 people, and they all think they're part of Sonoma too. It means you go to the supermarket and you take hours to get a head of lettuce because everybody wants to talk and tell you what you've done wrong, what you've done right. Really, in certain respects, being in politics is an experience in which one, by necessity, quickly masters the art of taking shit from anyone and somehow returning it transformed into gold. And you are really, if nothing else, a lightning rod for all the anxiety and all the neurosis that takes place around you as a community, in addition to your own, which can be prodigious. So there's actually a great role when you begin to accept the fact that this is what comes with the job, and you see yourself as that grounding wire, literally, to give a community some way of releasing what is this pent-up and exaggerated sense of both your importance and the importance of whatever seems to be circulating in the community. When you realize that your role is really just to be there for them to unload all of this energy that they have about you and about their lives onto you, you, as I say, very quickly have to change your relationship to the job or constantly be in some sort of aggressive process. Woke up one morning, editorial in the newspaper, Larry Barnett is a bigot. His attitude towards chain stores is nothing less than bigotry. No better than bigotry against black people. That's the way I started my breakfast, reading the paper about my bigotry. I was stunned. I mean, even when you do this for a long time, you don't ever entirely get used to the level of anger and aggression that can be directed toward you. But I ended up laughing because, of course, I am a chain store bigot. And he was exactly right. Of course, I considered it a virtuous action as opposed to a heinous act. When I was given my Dharma name by Lama Dawa Chogyam Rinpoche, who was a Tibetan Lama, I came to appreciate the not so subtle sense of humor of the Tibetans, in that he ceremoniously gave me the name of Sonam Tobgyal, which translates as King of Virtuous Action. Just a slight burden to carry. Very funny, these Tibetans. In case you were wondering, today's forecast: mundane wisdom born of ignorant projection in the morning, followed by an afternoon that's fair to partly cloudy, And for the week ahead, expect more of the same. I'll read a few of these, see what they prompt. When it comes to the impermanence of all things, it's good to remember, dear ones, nothing rivals that of public opinion. I chose some poems today that I've written that have a bit to do with politics. I write a poem every day. It's become part of my daily practice. It gives me a chance to, put down on paper whatever it is I'm working through. And as I say, politics gives you some very strange things to work through. Last year I was the mayor, and an event called the North American Forum was held in the town of Sonoma. This event was sponsored by the World Affairs Council of San Francisco and featured delegates from Canada, the United States, and Mexico, about 75 of them who were coming for a 3-day conference. The notables at the event included an ex-Prime Minister of Canada, an ex-Minister of Mexico, and former Secretary of State George Shultz. Well, as mayor, of course, it's my job to welcome dignitaries to the town. I must confess I'm anything but a Republican. I'm actually a Green Party member. But that notwithstanding, in accordance with the appropriate dignity of the role, I went to the opening ceremony to welcome the dignitaries. Well, obviously, Secretary Shultz had been warned or been told that the mayor would greet him, and so I positioned myself not far from the entrance. This was in the old barracks in the Sonoma Plaza, a wonderful old building. And I'm standing there amidst the crowd, and finally I see this elderly gentleman on the arm of an aide come walking in slowly, and he's looking around, and he gets within a few feet of me, and I hear him say, "Is the mayor here?" Because of course he's a diplomat, he knows the drill. And I heard him, of course. I walked up to him and put out my hand. I said, "Mr. Secretary, I'm the Mayor of Sonoma, Larry Barnett. I want to welcome you to Sonoma." And he put out his hand and he grasped mine. He had a bony but firm grip. And I looked up and into his eyes, which were these actually rather soft and watery blue eyes. And he was standing there just holding my hand, gripping it like it was really grounding him in some way. And I realized, despite all my projections about George Shultz and that whole political crowd, that he was at that point in life, reminded me enormously of my 86-year-old father, just looking for a hand to welcome him into this event. So I looked into his eyes, he looked into mine, and then my eyes dropped down to his lapel. Of course, anyone in the diplomatic world has a lapel pin. I looked at his pin. It was a little top hat with stars and stripes. And then he dropped his eyes down to mine, and he looked at my pin, which was the Great Eastern Sun topped by the 3 jewels. And I smiled, and he smiled, and he shook my hand, said, thank you, it's nice to be here. Yeah, it was one of those interesting diplomatic moments of the lapel pins. He didn't ask me what it meant, but he was just glad to see I had a lapel pin. It was an interesting afternoon. I ended up sitting in a room with him alone, and with the minister from Canada and the minister from Mexico. And despite all that was going on in the world, what George Schultz wanted to talk about was that when he found out I was from New York, he wanted to talk about Brooklyn, and if I'd ever been to Ebbets Field. And he just was nostalgic for New York, which is where he grew up. Sometimes politics is maddening. You're dealing with a, how should I say it? The world of samsara, filled with rules, filled with structures, filled with, attempts by human beings to organize the confusion of existence into some system of common consent. But, of course, it's as imperfect and as confused as those who created it. And so it can be quite maddening. There's a certain level of government, which is the elected portion, and that's turned out to be much more than I ever expected it would be in terms of its meaning to me. As I was saying earlier, you really represent something to the community, and you end up feeling that need that the community has to have leaders and what they invest in that. But then there's also the permanent government of the non-electeds. And this is basically the mechanism, the bureaucracy of government that's been created to administer the day-to-day functions of the world. And that very naturally tends towards calcification and rigidity and job security and issues that have very little to do with their original essential mission, which was, we hope in part, to relieve suffering and keep things moving, keep the energy going. Doesn't always turn out that way. So I end up having a lot of dreams that I think come from my experience in politics, not to mention life. Last night, Mother Earth spoke to me during a wet storm. "I'm washing my hands of the whole thing," she said, weeping. But the creeks knew better and just laughed. Doesn't matter how frustrated we get, it'll be there again tomorrow. And so there really is no washing our hands of the whole thing, as far as I can tell. It's really my path has been, and politics has, as I say, magnified it, to accept the unity of samsara and nirvana, to use that as my path, to work with everything that presents itself to me as part of the path, to accept that the nature of my being is confused, that my sitting practice is the only way out for a while of the confusion. At the same time, to not invest in my sitting practice more than it is, which really is just how long can you sit and just sit. And hasn't that been an interesting process over the years? Sitting up here, I could get, of course, the panorama of the room. It was quite nice, a room filled with Buddha figures sitting quietly, except when occasional someone would look at the watch. It's fascinating. While en route to a community meeting, I found myself thinking, be soft, be strong, be serious, light. How should I be? At a stoplight, I looked left, whereupon a red neon sign flashed, open. That was it. That was my message before the meeting. And that's what I mean about using it all. Being open and aware enough to be able to incorporate anything into the practice. I realized that perhaps there's no such thing as untruth. That even the untrue is true. It's real. There's some reality to that. Some days are clearer than others, both in politics and in just everyday life. Some days when I sit down to write a poem, there's nothing there. So that's what I write about. No insights today? Oh, well, dear one, perhaps it is your growing equanimity. On the other hand, perhaps you are just running out of bullshit. So, what else happens in politics? You've got all this attention on you. You've got all this opportunity to influence the nature of your community and the policies of your community. And what are you going to do with it? Is it going to be a exercise in narcissism? And let's face it, anyone who gets into politics begins with some level of narcissism. You couldn't do it if you didn't. But the more interesting path in politics is when you realize that you'll be quoted, that your letters will end up in the paper, that you get to chair meetings, and this is really a huge opportunity. There are those in politics who, ego-driven primarily, see these opportunities as a chance for self-aggrandizement and an opportunity to increase one's popularity, perhaps, campaign donations. But at another level, if one can just get a little bit past all that, then you can really pay some attention to what are the positive contributions you can make to people's lives. And it's really a unique opportunity. Gavin Newsom was up in Sonoma over the last weekend for the film festival, to be there for the opening of this film about gay marriage and what he attempted to do or did do in San Francisco briefly. And people were quite taken with his willingness to sacrifice essentially any career in the Democratic Party nationally for that position. And it was, to me, an interesting demonstration of leadership, real leadership, not associated with self-aggrandizement, I don't think. And those risks are taken there are far too few of those risks taken in politics. Partly because people are desperate to be reelected, partly because their egos won't let them do it, or their handlers or their political advisors. But it's really at that edge in politics that you come up against that issue of virtuous action and what is the right thing to do, and how do you use your particular unique situation to change things. So it ends up being pretty wonderful work if you can get past the ego side of it. The counterpoint is, if you don't get past the ego side of it, you're just fighting aggressively all the time, which is, to me, pretty close to being in the hell realm. We can imagine the world as we'd like it to be and aggressively justify it, or we can see the world just as it is and skillfully work with it. And that's really the challenge for me, is trying to skillfully work with the world, be a force for something, but not do it in a way that requires attacking somebody else or aggressively pushing my point of view on others. Just got a couple more to read, and then that should be enough. There's another dream I had one night. Having lost my clothes while traveling amid torrential rains, I strode naked through a fancy restaurant filled with elegant diners and on out into the street. Hopping a boxcar train, I finally arrived as dawn broke at the famous Hotel Chaotic in a village on a hill by the sea. It was a great-looking hotel, too. I'll end with my substitute Pledge of Allegiance. At the beginning of our council meetings, we always say the Pledge of Allegiance. I've said the Pledge of Allegiance more in the last 12 years than I ever have in the rest of my life, perhaps except in grammar school. So now when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, I externally say all the words, but internally I say this. I pledge allegiance to the Buddha of the highest states of the Dharma, and to the mindfulness practice for which we sit, origination, understood, inner truth visible, with liberation and compassion for all. Thank you.
You are available for comments, questions?
Love it. Sure.
I was actually going to ask you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with politics on the scale of the mayor of a small town. So and you touch upon this somewhat about trying not to be aggressive, but the politics that I'm familiar with, of course, is on a much more national scene where it's very aggressive and cutthroat. And I wonder how you address. I mean, did you ever have a situation where your actual integrity was questioned, or where you had ad hominem attacks rather than just on the issues? And
all the time.
And how would you deal that without sinking down to that kind of response. I mean, how is bringing Buddhist practice into doing that?
Well, first answer to the question is yes, all the time. I have been called a tyrant. I've been called a demagogue. I've been called deceitful, manipulative, every name in the book. No one ever accused me of beating my wife. But I've had to deny everything else. No, actually, I don't deny anything, first of all, because I don't accept that framework. But internally, from a practice standpoint, what I end up wrestling with, because I do react, I can't not react to that stuff. So then, it's really a matter of looking at myself and thinking about who and what it is I'm attempting to defend. Am I what? And, as we get down to the core of answering that question, the deeper you go, the harder it is to answer. So it's really a matter of accepting the fact that people are going to have these feelings and these projections about you and are going to make public accusations about you and ridicule you, and but that's theirs. That's their stuff. So my approach at meetings when it happens, and it often happens at a public meeting. It happened the other night when a woman accused me of betraying the progressive environmental ag movement in Sonoma County, which was quite interesting. And I thanked her for her comments. She and the others who prompt those reactions in me are my teachers. They teach me about my own defense of self, which, what can people take away from me in the end? Nothing. There's nothing to take away, because there's really nothing here at a certain level. And if I can tap into that level, then the emotions and the rest of it are kind of interesting to watch, but they don't have that much content to them, really. They're just emotions. Now, this is after 12 years. I can't say I was very good at this 12 years ago. And I'd write letters of defense to the newspaper, defending myself. The editor of the newspaper would hold my editorial or my letter and respond to it in the next newspaper with one of his own in response to mine, which had been in response to his. I then realized that I couldn't win that game. He owns the newspaper. He can play it. He can make up all the rules and do it any way he wants. Not only that, but making that kind of defense and saying, I am not. And I've just been doing this, and I've just been trying to do that, and it's not fair, and all just a lot of whining. I got tired of it. So I figured, I've been elected 3 times. And I run the cheapest campaigns in town. And I've never spent as much as my opponents on any campaigns. And this is my 12th year, and I'm not going to run again. 12 years to me was an adequate sentence. But it's been a fabulous teaching experience. And so that may be not much of an answer, but I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it. Ultimately, people have opinions. Everybody's got them. So what?
Has your practice or your involvement with Tibetan Buddhism ever come up politically or in campaigns? Or? No. The only thing that comes up is people ask me what my pin means. And I tell them, and they go, oh.
And then the conversation seems to end. Yes, sir.
I'm always confused when I hear people talk about politicians, about what the job really consists of. In the old days, historically, politicians were supposed to be people who were elected or chosen to bring some kind of moral or intellectual astuteness to problem solving. They were an elite of sorts. But nowadays, it seems that politics is really much more about salesmanship. It's kind of like the home shopping channel. People watch the politicians on TV, offer them different things, and then instead of sending money, you send your votes. And so George Bush promised us security, and Ronald Reagan said it was morning in America, and I look at that and I wonder, coming from a Buddhist standpoint, where changing the world, remaking the world in your own image is not necessarily a good thing, not necessarily a desirable thing. What then does a politician offer? I mean, when you're campaigning, or when or people ask you what you do as a politician, if you're not claiming a particularly advanced wisdom, you should elect me because I'm more astute, or I'm more enlightened, or whatever, which was sort of the old system, and you're not out there to sell something, I mean, do we then elect politicians on the basis of their ability to be power brokers, their ability to hear all the sides and somehow bring some kind of harmony out of that? Because if that's the case, then rather than paying attention to all these messages that the spin doctors and the handlers offer people to get them elected, we should really be looking at people's ability to solve conflicts. Who are the people that the power brokers are dealing with, and how have they done that? And no one seems to focus on that in an election anymore. I don't really even have a clear idea who our national politicians are really brokering as they're doing things. Or is it still necessary to say as a politician that you're offering people something? You're offering comfort, you're offering wisdom, you're offering security. I'm just sort of, the whole process has become sort of mythologized to me. And so since you've actually lived it, I just wonder if you have any particular...
Well, Plato, was not a fan of democracy. His prediction was that we would elect good-looking politicians and have poor nutrition because we would only buy food that looked good. The unbruised apples. And he was quite concerned about democracy for that reason. And one can make the argument that it has demonstrated that certain kind of trait. There certainly has been historically a disparagement of what for most of human culture was the dominant form of leadership, which was monarchy of one sort or another, which had its good and its bad sides, just as democracy does. I mean, if you had a wise and benevolent leader who was really looking out for the interests of his people, there were golden ages in various periods of cultures all over the world that blossomed under monarchies. So, I think with regard to your question about how do you quote unquote sell yourself or campaign, I think partly the answer to the question is that people are looking for authenticity. They will vote for someone who seems to offer some sense of a real human being on the inside. I think people are just desperately hungry for authenticity. And they're surrounded by hype and bullshit all day long. They're assaulted by it endlessly. And I think the marketers and the world of business have made a serious miscalculation in playing on the cynicism of the public and and indulging in essentially a cynical view of human beings. So I think that when one is attempting to discuss why, because ultimately you're saying to people, I would like to have your vote because I want to do something, you still have to give them an idea of what it is that is important to you. And so in my particular case, the issues that I've always focused on have been issues of the local environment, issues of the best way of planning for growth as opposed to just simply standing on the sidelines and responding to it as it happens. Issues of policy that have to do with the expenditure and the direction in which government focuses its attention and what does it pay attention to. And I've always actually just run campaigns that had to do with issues, the issues that were important to the people as I have heard it. And I would address those issues. I wouldn't talk about what I was going to impose or what I was going to do, elect me and I'll get you this and I'll get you that. It's more a matter of, this is what I hear this community wants. This is what I would work with. If you also agree that this is what you want for the community, then what you see is what you'll get. But, I was beaten in my first campaign by the TV repairman who'd fixed everybody's TV. So sometimes you just can't beat relationships, particularly in a small town. Yes, sir.
I just think you're raising an important topic. As our community, the gay community, grows up, our institutions mature, how we treat our leaders and the whole question of leadership. I look around and I see burning out and depression and scandal, religious leadership as well as gay leadership. And a lot of us don't want to go there. We don't want to step up to the plate. We see the damage, so we're not going to do it. A lot of our groups rent property we don't own. And it's like, at some point, we're going to have to continue to step up to the plate. And I just think it's an important, unaddressed topic. We all tend to back away from it. And I think part of the answer is when you said you're willing to not run again, to just hold it loosely and let it go. Because I used to be in a similar business in Boston, and it's murder. And I let it go. I don't do it. And I'm glad I had the inner wisdom to know I did it. It was service, but it's time to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's an important topic. I appreciate what you said.
Well, thank you. It's been quite interesting to, and actually a bit discouraging sometimes to see how few people are willing to step up. And I understand why. It is a bruising, exposed position you put yourself in, and you really get battered around. But I do think that a spiritual practice that can be fueled by that incredible storm of experience that happens out there is a fantastic experience, and it's not for everyone. But the problem is that we keep getting people into political offices who are ego-driven, just out for money or power, and it's a terrible problem, because few people who are driven by other things, other feelings and other needs, get drawn into the political sphere, and so it's dominated often by this very aggressive and angry and unkind set of expectations and behaviors that really are challenging. But somebody's got to do it. I mean, is what it comes down to. I mean, somebody's got to do it. And that's, when I first ran, I started going to some meetings, to these council meetings, and I said, "Gee, there's something wrong here. I think I could communicate better than these people are communicating. There's just something about this process that doesn't look right to me." And now I'm going to go off this council, and I'm not sure what it's going to return to. I mean, it's had a variety of kinds of people on it over the years. Most of them have had, I think, a good heart and wanted the best for their community. But not all of them take the job very seriously. And that's typically in a small town like ours, where you have a city manager form of government. The city managers, if you have a weak city council, a council that's not engaged, basically run the ship. And so we'll see what happens in Sonoma. In the past, we had a city manager who basically ran the town, and we had an unengaged city council. They just went to meetings and did what they were told to do. And that hasn't been true for more than a decade in Sonoma. So we'll see what happens. But letting go is part of it. And I would hope that someone in this room will run for something.
Yeah, I was self-production in New York a couple years ago. Someone had put together parts 1 and parts 2 of Henry IV and did it at the Lincoln Center in a ferociously great production that went on for 4 hours and had a great spectacle, from battle scenes to courtroom scenes and intrigue and bedroom scenes and tavern scenes, and Kevin Kline was Falstaff, and it was a spectacle of leadership, of heroism and courage. And at the curtain call, the audience not only exploded, but people were weeping because the actors had managed to capture authentic nobility. And there was this sense of how bereft we are in this culture for the spectacle of true leadership. And once at a dinner party, once when we were moaning this, one woman said, "Wait a minute, this country breeds leaders on an assembly line basis. They don't go into politics. That is our fight." So I salute you. Did you feel like a call? I mean, when you went to that meeting, did you something in you stand up?
I didn't see leadership there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I suppose I did. And in the Shambhala tradition, of which I'm a part, this Tibetan view of the warrior is at the heart of the tradition. And it is not the warrior, with the sword of battle. It's the warrior with the sword of Manjushri, cutting through ego and obscurations. It's the warrior that is willing to be open, with an open heart, that demonstrates courage. And much of the practice centers around the growing understanding of the nature of that experience. And then that's really what this political realm is about. It's a warriorship of a kind, which can either be done, with a sword that slashes through other people like they're just stalks of wheat, or cuts to the heart, cuts to the truth of matter, and opens people up. I mean, we just had a terribly divisive situation in Sonoma about our hospital, which was why I was accused of betraying a segment of the community, because I was an advocate for this hospital plan. And it divided the community right down the middle, and I recently sent a letter into the paper, which may or may not get published, basically saying that what the community needed now that we're through this issue and it's essentially remained unresolved, was just some space for some openness and consideration and compassion to emerge, to see what comes out of it. Because the new hospital, if there's going to be a hospital in Sonoma in the future, it's not going to be a byproduct of aggression, name-calling, backbiting, nastiness. That is not what's going to produce a healthcare facility in our community. It's going to come from that other place. And people lose sight of that. And they feel they have to fight. But there's a common ground between all of us as human beings. And when you get down to a personal level and you have an authentic, real conversation with virtually everyone, they all can agree on that. It gets messy when it becomes a matter of movement and matter of dogma and matter of positions, and people get rigidly locked into a solid view, and then need to continue to fight to maintain the structure of that solid view. And there's the harder you fight that, the more solid it becomes. The more aggressive you get, the more defensive people become. So it's just not the path.
I think we need to bring this to a close. Larry, Barnett, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any announcements?
Well, actually, the first one is I'm having a potluck this afternoon. Please come. Around 4 o'clock, you can come have tea, and then we'll eat around 6 or so. You can prepare food there too, and there are flyers with my address outside. And the second one is the community thrift store accepts donations, and it looks like 6 or 7 people in the last quarter took their fabulous clothes, community thrift, and as a result, we got a check for $115. So that's the way that we raise money, and they're on Valencia, and we get a quarterly check from them. So thank you all. You know who you are.
Good day. I'm the potluck coordinator, as most of you know. We do have a potluck today over at Bob's house. There's also one next week in Berkeley. There are some flyers out there. It's going to be a nice banquet. I'm going to be there. And it's also next Sunday, 4 to 7. It's in Berkeley, 2 Northgate Avenue. And there are flyers out on the table. There are flyers out on the table for both events. So if you want to come to Bob's event today, which I'm going to do, there's flyers out there for that too. If anybody wants to host the potluck, see me.
Anyway, I was talking to Pooh Shore about speaking, and she asked that I put out some posters. She's going to be co-leading a LGBT weekend at Tassajara from June 9th to 11th. It's a celebration weekend celebrating the harmony of difference and equality with Dennis Lakey and Pooh Schrader. So these cards are out there on the table next to the potluck flyers.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I went on Pooh's retreat last year at Tassajara, and it's wonderful. I know if you've never been there before, it's like just a special place. It's a wonderful place. Not this coming Saturday, but the week after, I think that's the 28th, we're going to do the famous Chimney Rock wildflower hikes. You just if this rain never ends. So just put that out. Be prepared for that.
Speaking of retreats, a week from Tuesday, April 25th, is the annual LGBT retreat at Spirit Rock Meditation Center up in Western Marin. It's a 5-night silent Vipassana retreat. And if anyone is interested in deepening their practice and having a wonderful experience. It's co-led by a lesbian and a gay man, and it's beautiful up there in the rolling hills of western Marin. Some people live close by, and the meditation hall is spectacular, and the facilities are great, and it's a sliding scale. And I think there's still openings, and the information is on their website, spiritrock.org.
Do we have a host today? We don't have a host today.
Oops.
Well, in that case, I think there is a teapot from a hot water maker out there for making tea. If you choose to have some, please make sure you wash your cup out, leave it by the sink. I guess there are no refreshments out there to go with the tea, but think well of what might have been. There is a dana bowl. We suggest donation between 5 and 8, less if you need to, more if you can. And if there are no other announcements, yes.
There's a steering committee meeting 3 weeks from today. First Sunday in May, and that's following this meeting. So if anyone has any ideas they want the steering committee to consider, you can come to the meeting or speak with anybody on the steering committee and get you on the agenda.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.